In 1919, Sigmund Freud published an essay he titled The Uncanny, which in its actual German to English translation means unhomely. It's only when the familiar becomes the uncanny that we begin to fear it. Within what we can recognize lives something scary, only because it's so recognizable, identifiable, and yet forbiddingly other. What Freud called the double, we know as doppelgängers, subjects that portray a form of the self and somehow in no way do they feel safe. This video is going to be looking at the double doppelgängers, the uncanny, and breaking it down into something more digestible through appearance, feeling, and fear. Slavoj Zizek is a philosopher that wrote on doppelgangers using Alfred Hitchcock's film Psycho as a prerequisite to understanding Freud's Uncanny Theory. As I'm sure not everyone has watched Psycho, let's quickly look through its summary. A secretary, Marian steals $40,000 from her employer in order to run away with her boyfriend. Overcome by exhaustion during a heavy rainstorm traveling on the back roads to avoid the police, she stops for the night at the quiet Bates Motel and meets the polite but highly strung proprietor, Norman Bates, a young man with an interest in taxidermy and a difficult relationship with his mother. And later we come to see how difficult that relationship is. Zizek explains that these two characters are that much related in how and what they are. Norman is nothing but her mirror negative. Marian's world is the world of contemporary American everyday life, whereas Norman's world is its nocturnal reverse. The relationship between these two worlds is that of the two surfaces of the Mobius band. If we progress far enough on one surface, all of a sudden we find ourselves on its reverse. Zizek's Mobius strip for finding oneself on the same side introduces a new understanding of the double, a new way of looking into the face of the other. That possibly even something that doesn't resemble you is so much like you that in many ways it's your nocturnal self. What we identify as uncomfortably familiar in a Freudian way could just be our lack of true recognition of who and what we really are. That possibly what makes this familiar thing so odd is that it resembles the nocturnal self we suppress and do not recognize as I, and associate it so much so to something other that its mere existence is a reminder of why we fear it. In 1960, a French film called Eyes Without a Face introduced cinema to a new understanding of the uncanny. The film's central premise revolves around Dr. Genesi's relentless obsession with recreating his daughter Christiane's face, which has been horrifically disfigured in a car accident. Dr. Genesi's fixation on doppelgangers serves as the driving force behind the film's macabre narrative. His obsession is rooted in guilt, and causing Christiane's disfigurement becomes the catalyst for his actions. His surgical pursuits can be understood as an attempt to make amends for the past. He believes that by restoring her face, he can undo the damage he inflicted upon her. This desire to recreate his daughter as a mirror image of her former self reflects his subconscious need for redemption. The doppelganger motif is presented when Christiane herself becomes an uncanny double, wearing a featureless white mask to conceal her disfigurement. This mask symbolizes her internal conflict, as it is both a defense mechanism against the judgment of others and a reflection of her lost self. Her identity, fragmented by trauma, blurs the line between the known and the unknown. Christiane's identity crisis is a profound exploration of the human psyche. Her disfigurement forces her to grapple with her sense of self-worth and identity. Her face, which should serve as a mirror of her identity, becomes a symbol of the uncanny, the transformation of the known into the unfamiliar. The white mask that Christiane wears embodies the uncanny within herself. It becomes a barrier between her and the world. The mask also represents her desire to hide the uncanny double that she has become, a reflection of her former self that she can no longer recognize. And to think How much of our identity is suppressed and dependent on our physical appearance and visually attractive aesthetics, and how much resides in the realm of desire and the subconscious. It's important to note that the uncanny contains a set of subject doppelgangers: physical doubles, reflection doubles, transformation doubles, and narrative doubles. As much as these doubles are representative of the self and are in many ways threats to those very selves, there's a distinct question of why. Why do we fear these doubles, or rather are displeased with them? Why not encourage their existence relative to that they are us? Could it be that the reason we feel so threatened is because of an inherent narcissistic, internal, almost eternal, self-proclaimed individualistic mindset in which we greed on knowing that we are the only versions that should exist? Could it be that the real evil that the doppelganger, the double, acknowledges, reveals, is not themselves, but you? That the real evil version is the one whose existence only matters because they wish it to be so? Jordan Peele plays on this narrative in his film, Us. In 2019, Jordan Peele released his film, Us, and while there are many Freudian psychoanalytical takes on the film, and how the uncanny is the prevailing theme of the movie, I've seen that a more noticeable and interesting usage of Freud's uncanny theory in the film was that of the return of the repressed. Freud's concept of return of the repressed suggests that repressed thoughts, desires, or traumas can resurface unexpectedly, often causing distress or psychological suffering. In Us, this concept takes on a literal and uncanny form. We learn throughout the film that Adelaide's shadow self switched places with her at a young age and began to live her life in the world above, and that later on, years later, Red, the true Adelaide, who has been suppressed, returns to take back what is hers, her life. The physically reflective doubles, the doppelgangers, represent the repressed and forgotten aspects of Adelaide's life. They embody her suppressed past, a life she had left behind, but is now returning to confront her. When we think of the other, something even slightly other, it torments us, it lingers, because maybe the worst thing it could be, the largest threat, is ourselves. Silicon Valley just slightly resembles what a face should be. Disfigured hidden figures represent what shouldn't be in the dark, and when those two begin to shake hands and decide to play games, they decide to resemble the self, and leave nothing left but you.